Welcome to Soltron. I'm going to do something a little bit different today. I had a couple requests to do basically a live customizing. So I'm going to do some really quick customizing on this figure. So I want to make it more horse-like, and I've already customized this figure a lot. But basically I'm going to install ball joints here so that the green end of the Brontosaurus can connect with the orange section, and it kind of lengthens out the torso. And the other thing I want to do is I want to make these legs able to end backwards, or to bend backwards more like a horse's leg. So basically the horse mode is just going to have the legs kind of closer together like this, and then the head like angles like this, and then you get like a little unicorn horn. And then these legs straighten out a little bit to make the body more narrow. And then you have a pretty good looking horse as it is. But I have a couple issues with this horse mode is it's got a lot of junk back here behind this leg. So I think if I can make this leg bend the opposite direction, like if it can bend forward a little bit more, it might disguise that a little bit. And then if this joint can kind of get out of the way and connect basically here, that might make for a more convincing horse mode. So it's going to be something like that. So this is going to have to be replaced with ball joints, and then I'm going to have to insert sockets right here. So first I'll take these apart and we'll take a look at what's going on in here. Okay, so this is really basic. The only thing that's holding this leg assembly together are these 3 screws here. So I'll just unscrew all these. Okay, that's unscrewed. And I have a big, or kind of a small box of screws. So if I lose any of these screws, it's not really the end of the world. It's not a big deal to me. So this basically just comes off now that it's been unscrewed. And I don't really need this section for this custom. I just need what's going on in here. So this is what I want. And then once this is all disassembled, you can see this actually does have the range of motion I already want. It's already got the ratcheted indents. It's already got everything I want to it. What's really blocking it is these little bits of plastic right here are what's causing the issue. So just right there, I could either shave that down, or I can shave these little bits of black plastic here, which would be harder because it would still have to, I'd have to have a really circular shape right there. So I'm just going to go with the path of least resistance. I'm just going to shave these down, kind of like do a diagonal cut right there. Since the plastic I'm cutting is pretty small, I have a couple options. I could just use this hobby knife and just trim it away at it, which would be pretty fast, but I prefer using this high-speed cutter. These cutting discs are really the best thing for cutting plastic. It's only going to take a few seconds, and it goes really quickly when you put it on a Dremel. Okay, this might get pretty loud, but basically I'm just cutting off this little corner here. I don't really need to do a lot of the plastic. It's going to be pretty awkward to do this on camera. Okay, so I reassembled the leg. I just clipped the 2 parts back on. Here's the part I shaved down, and you can see here's the part of the plastic that hasn't been treated yet. And then this piece of plastic is still preventing the leg from folding forward any further than this. But if I take off the piece I haven't cut yet, you can see that the piece I did cut does give me that extra click, which is what I wanted. I might go for a second click. And it looks like it's already cut enough to do that. So very tiny cut, but it gave me the result I wanted to give me a more natural looking rear leg for the horse. Okay, now I trimmed the other side, so now I have that full forward motion that I wanted. And I'm just going to clean this up with a hobby knife and cut off the little bits of little white plastic that got shaved off. And then I'm going to do the same thing to the other leg. Okay, and as usual with customizing, there is a little bit of a complication. If you completely detach this part of the leg, then it doesn't really fit back in because the top part here is wider, and you can see that shape right here. It's a little bit of a trapezoid. It's not quite a square. So when I try to fit this back in, it's going to crash into these little parts here. So I'm going to have to cut a small bevel on these edges here so that it can just slide back into place instead of just crashing right there. You can see there's just a little bit of issue. So I'm just going to carve that up with a hobby knife. Okay, and I already did a little bit of that off camera, so you can see it's now like at a 45-degree angle, but basically you just take your knife and you just shave it like that to get that beveled edge. And now it'll slide back into place, so no issue there. So now I'm going to reattach the legs. Okay, so now the rear horse's legs are done, so I'm just going to use the one click that I enabled on that, and that will enable these to slide backward a little bit more. So it's going to look like this, which is not too bad. That's about what I was going for. And then this tail kind of sort of works, kind of doesn't work. I like to have it here as a side cannon for the horse mode, but it kind of works as a horse's tail just hanging down here too. So now I'm going to replace these posts. So the first thing to do is just unscrew them. Okay, nothing too complicated there. And then I'm probably going to have to drill out this bit and insert a Lego ball joint. Okay, so basically what I want to do is I want to change those connection points with these. And these Lego ball joints actually fit over these connection points kind of perfectly. So I'm just going to insert a larger screw here to hold this into place better and extend how long these posts are. And then I'm probably going to use some polymorph plastic to just connect these solidly onto these. So I'm going to find some screws that can lengthen these posts. Okay, and here's my screw box, so I have plenty of options. Okay, one screw is in place, so now I'm just going to tighten this other screw. Okay, so now my two new studs are in place, and they're a little bit too big for this to fit, so I'm going to have to drill out the inside of this just a little bit so that this will fit more snugly on top. Okay, that should be enough to loosen it. Okay, and both ball joints have been widened, so these just really pop right on now. And this one's actually on really tight, but I'm still going to put some plastic in it just to make sure that there's no wiggling or moving around, since this is the only connection point between these two really giant robots. So here's what I use as filler. I like to use these polyplastics, and I use this little glass tub. So basically I'm just going to take a chunk of plastic or just a couple of these beads. I'm going to pour them in here, add water, and microwave it for a couple minutes, and that should melt the plastic. Okay, so here's how the plastic looks when it's melted. It's now a clear color. I waited a little bit, so it's actually not very hot to the touch. And you can see I put on way too much, but I'm just going to put this ball joint over. It's going to shove most of it out of the way. And now I'm going to do the same thing to the other ball joint. Okay, and while it's cooling off, before it cools off completely, I'm just going to tear off all the excess bits. And the really cool thing about the polymorph plastic is you can just reuse all this plastic, so everything that cools off can just be microwaved again and can be used for filler again. So that pretty much cleaned up that stud as much as I'd like. I don't really care that much for that kind of precision detail work, so that's actually going to be clean enough for my purposes. Okay, and off camera I made a couple little tweaks. I shaved down this black box here so that the leg wouldn't be bashing into it, and I trimmed down some of the plastic so the tail can rest more naturally. So now, basically the last step is just working on the front section here, and I need to figure out, basically right here is where I'm going to put the sockets on this blaster cannon, basically, that combines the two halves. So I'm going to use these kinds of sockets right here, and I'm just going to embed those into this section. So this is what it looks like from the other side. Basically I want these to go right there, So I'm going to have to cut a channel here and here out of the plastic, and basically I'm just going to insert these right here, and I'm going to use more of the polymorph plastic to keep these held in place. These were the original connection points, so I don't really have to measure anything out. I just need to put these right here a little bit lower than where the original connection points were. And the cutting discs are going to be too wide for this. I could probably start the holes with these, but I'm going to have to use this metallic high-speed cutter to get the rectangular shapes that I want, so I can insert them right there. I should probably mention I've done this a lot. I have cut my fingers with this. It's not that big a deal. It's not as dangerous as it looks, thankfully. Okay, so now I cut the rectangular shape, so that's going to seat this pretty well. So to clean out this plastic, I like to use these cuticle nippers, and basically they just bite the plastic and grip it for you. They're kind of like little pliers that you can also use just for tearing things out of the way. So these are a pretty handy tool to have for customizing. I've never really heard of anybody using these, but I use them all the time. Okay, so I cleaned this up with a hobby knife. This piece mostly fits at this point. There's definitely some plastic deeper in that's getting in the way, so I'm probably just going to trim the sides of this ball joint because I don't really want to unscrew this and have to deal with any precision cutting. So I'm just going to use the cuticle nippers and cut these parts off and just shove that right in there. Okay, so that's pretty nicely seated in there now. I haven't put in the polymorph plastic yet. I'm going to do a test fit, so I'm just going to connect that to his other chassis here. Okay, and that's how it looks connected, so that's working really well for me. That's pretty much exactly what I wanted. So I'm just going to go ahead and do the same thing to the other side and connect that ball joint. And I just want to point out one tip with customizing. You might have noticed that I pretty much did this entire side first before I even started on this side, and it makes sense to kind of like do a cut here, and keep it symmetrical. But with customizing, so many things often fail that it actually makes more sense to like finish something and make sure it works before tearing up the other side. Because I've just had a lot of projects where I've done it symmetrically and then it just didn't work out, so I just ruined like two halves of a toy for no reason when I could have just did the one side for experimenting. So that's why I like to work asymmetrically. Okay, both ball joints are ready, so I'm going to do one more test fit before I plastic everything into place. Yep, that's pretty perfect, so now I'm going to go melt some more plastic. Okay, so the plastic is really hot this time, so I'm going to try to do this very quickly so I don't burn myself, but basically I'm just going to put the plastic where I want the ball joints to sit and just try to fill in those gaps as best I can. And then I just jam the ball joint into place. And usually I only do one at a time because I like it to be a little bit neater, but since I'm doing this on camera, I'm just going to get it all done at once. Okay, and then I just shove the other ball joint in. And then I'm going to try to make them look as symmetrical as possible. And I'm not going to stress too much about all the extra plastic. And you can see this one's clearly crooked. That's not that big a deal to me. It's important that it just does what it needs to do. And speaking of which, I'm going to have to connect it to the ball joints now, in case there is like some irregularity. And that's pretty much done. I'm just going to let that cool. And this extra wad of plastic, I'm just going to flatten it out so I can cut it into pieces, and that will let it heat faster next time. If it's just a huge chunk, it'll take a long time to microwave. Alright, I put this in the freezer for a little bit, so now it's cooled off, and I would say that this round of customizing is done. I accomplished what I wanted to do. These legs are now backward jointed, and then the connection point is now done with ball joints and lengthened up the torso a little bit, so the back here looks like less of a mess. and everything's looking pretty good to me. Okay, and his rider fits on with no issue. So I think for next steps, probably the last things I want to do on this guy is give him some kind of mane. So maybe I'll just put some spikes sticking out back here, like some red spikes. And I think that'll look really good. And then just a set of reins so that the riding robot can keep control. But that's it for customizing for today.